Guest is Mitali Paul. She is born in Germany and raised in India. Mitali has over 2 decades of experience in the healthcare industry. Mitali joins me this morning to share her journey and empower us to believe in ourselves and our abilities. Good morning, Mitali. I'm so excited. It's the first time I'm getting to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me on this show. I'm excited, and as I mentioned to you, a little nervous because I've done so many talks and so many lectures. I'm adjunct faculty too, and I've presented at conferences, but I'm always talking as a subject matter expert about the healthcare industry. So it's a little nerve-wracking to talk about yourself. But thank you so much for having me here. So as you mentioned in the intro, I was born in Germany. My dad actually, interestingly, worked for BMW there. My sister and I were born in Germany, and we moved back to India when I was about a year and a half old. So pretty much the rest of my growing years, I lived in India, and actually right before I moved to Houston, I worked in Mumbai and lived in Mumbai for a couple of years, but I grew up in Hyderabad. So it's been a very interesting journey. Growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor. My mom's a doctor, my dad's was an engineer, and like any typical Indian Desi family, you only have career choices to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, right?
Right.
Nothing else counts. And so for me, my mom was always kind of a role model, and I loved, she was a family practitioner, and I loved what she had with her patients, the relationship. I mean, we've had babies delivered in our living room, and we would have, she was the typical Indian family doctor that went on home visits and had this little evening clinic that patients would come to. So it was fascinating to watch her take care of patients. And so for me, growing up, that's all I wanted to do. That's all I knew, and that's what I wanted to do, was be a doctor. But of course, life had its own plans, and we kind of had lots of challenges, as a family. There were, and so when I was 18, I lost my dad. That was kind of a crucial time in my career where, I wanted to get into med school, but we realized that didn't have the financial wherewithal to be able to get into med school. And so I went through a phase of not knowing what to do in my life. And it was hard because all my life, that's all I wanted to do. And, growing up, of course, we always had financial struggles and, different challenges that came our way. But as a family, we figured out how to kind of, make it work. So I find myself, wanting to do something in healthcare, but not having the means. And so just like everybody else was getting their MBA, I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get my MBA. So got into a bachelor's in business program, was completely unmotivated and bored out of my mind, because that was the first time I was taking lessons in accounting and finance.
Right.
And I'm like, gosh, geez, like I can't see my life, doing this. I want to be, with people, making a difference, and actually be in healthcare. So anyways, long story short, I ran into someone that actually was doing their master's in hospital administration. And that was the first time I heard about it. It was a relatively new field in India, kind of an upcoming field. And so ended up getting curious about it. And I said, tell me more, and then as he started kind of describing what the career path is and what hospital administration is all about, it was the aha moment for me, because I had found my way back into healthcare industry, not as a physician, not as a provider, but actually as, a healthcare administrator or a leader. And so that kind of was the defining moment in my life where, I suddenly found this newfound path. I always tell people, don't ever give up, because, in times when because that period was kind of a very low period in my life, knowing, having lost my dad and realizing that I didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And going through the motions of, supporting my mom through the crisis. I had a younger brother, an older sister. So it was kind of challenging, but having found out, it was almost like a beacon that, I looked onto. And so that's how I started my career in healthcare administration. So I went to Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. It was one of the best programs in the country at that point, and got to actually work at Harkishan Das Hospital for about a year. And that at that point, I was, wanting to do something more, because what I realized was everybody that was in healthcare administration or hospital administration in India was either had some kind of a clinical background. And so they were either doctors or nurses. In a class of 30 at TIS, I was the only one with a business major. Everybody else had some kind of clinical background. So guess what? When we come down to placement time, where we're interviewing, I was one of the last people to get a job placement, which was very, very, discouraging for me, knowing that, this was something I was passionate about. This is something that I wanted to do, and realizing that just the lack of clinical experience, regardless of how bright I was and how well I did in school and everything else, I didn't have that real world experience that people were looking for, and they thought that that was the validation needed for you to be successful in running a hospital. And so, again, I found myself at the crossroads where I was like, what can I do to differentiate myself? What can I do so that that does not hold me back in my career? And so, while I was doing my master's program, I had to complete a thesis. And my guide then, I still remember, he was a consultant, and he had come to the U.S., and my thesis topic was managed care. So believe it or not, managed care was a good thing back then, because we in India were actually trying to study it and implement it. People out here will have a different outlook about managed care. But so when I was working with him, I started studying the U.S. managed healthcare, and he had actually, my thesis guide had actually got his master's here in the U.S. and gone back to India and started his own consulting firm and was very successful in Mumbai. And so I said, you know what, maybe that's what I need to do, is somehow add to my educational credentials or qualifications so that people can see that, I can't undo not having the clinical background, but I needed to be able to add some kind of credentials so that I could really differentiate myself in the market. And so that's what got me here to the U.S. I had every intention of coming here, going to school. My sister was instrumental. She had already immigrated. She was getting her degree in MIS, Management Information Systems, and had moved to Seattle, was working for Microsoft. And she was telling me, you're wasting your life in India. You need to be coming out here. And, you're kind of underutilized or unrecognized there, and you truly need to be focusing on something. And it kind of was, in terms of it being serendipity, I was holding myself back because my mom was back home alone in India. My brother had already immigrated here too, to get his undergrad. And so I was holding myself back because I didn't want her to be by herself. But I also saw that even though I had overcome the initial hurdles of getting into, a healthcare administration program, one of the best in India, and then, still struggling with proving myself in the industry, being a woman, being non-clinical, there were a couple of things that were already working against me. So then I decided I would come here, get, a second master's, and I had every intention of going back and, going back to India and working there. Of course, I came here, started going to school, ended up getting a full-time job at the Methodist hospital. It was the Methodist hospital back then. And, never looked back because it was just a phenomenal work experience and very, very different from what I'd experienced before. And I realized that, if I had to really realize my full potential in terms of being able to work through anything and everything. I
Right.
needed to have people around that would give me the opportunity and not just base, things on what you've done in the past or what your, educational qualifications is. A
Right.
lot of times you have to look at people's potential and what they're able to do. And very early on, I had mentors and people that kind of showed that interest and confidence in me. And that really, really helped me in my career. I don't think I would have ever made it to a hospital CEO at 35 had I lived in India or, gone back to India. And I know that it's come with its challenges and it's come with its sacrifices. But there's been a lot of lessons that I've learned along the way. And, that's why I love to share my journey with people. Because on top of everything else, I also had to overcome the immigration journey because,
Right.
you had to go through the visa sponsorships and getting... I was the first international student at University of Houston Clear Lake to even get an H-1, visa sponsorship to get into a fellowship at MD Anderson. So not only do you have to compete and get into some really renowned programs, the next step for me was to have people to be able to sponsor me as well, to be able to work. And so not only have I had, the career challenges, there's also the whole immigration process. So I relate really strongly with international students and their journeys and their battles. And, it's so easy to give up and it's so easy to change courses. There were times when
Yes.
people were like, oh, get into IT, you'll get, an H1 or do something else. And I was like, no, this is what I'm passionate about. This is my path. And I got to stay put.
Yeah, you were really focused on what you wanted, so that was important because, like you said, a lot of foreign students who come here, they start off with something, but then when they're here and there's so much going on their plate, they change, right? They just change to different things because it's a lot easier. So what you did is remarkable because that is the road to success. I mean, that's how I look at it. And and for you to share that with so many people before even coming here, that's great because that really inspires others. Like, don't give up and always, kind of stay focused. And if that is your passion, then work towards that. So don't always, I know many times we are like, well, there's always options. But sometimes the other option is not always the best option. Right?
I actually tell people don't have a plan B because when you have a plan B, when you have a plan B, then it's almost like it's a safety net, right?
Right.
Because you're thinking, okay, if this doesn't work, I'll do this.
Yeah.
For us, like literally from when I was 7, 8 years old, we didn't know, we had financial challenges. And so
Right.
we didn't know where the next meal was coming from. We grew up with a lot of financial insecurity. There was a lot of other dynamics in our childhood, which is not very conventional in educated Indian families. Like I started tutoring and, when I was in 7th grade, that was my very first job. I worked as a telemarketer. I did so many different things that growing up, I didn't see my friends doing it because they came from, secular families. But my parents always, whether we could afford anything else or not, we couldn't afford vacations, but we went to the best schools. They invested in our education and giving us that strong foundation to be able to kind of, make our way in the
Right.
world. And then, of course, whether you, we talk about it or not, gender does play a role, even in America,
Even
it
now,
does.
yes.
When you look around, it's only now that you start seeing a lot of women and women of color that are in CEO executive roles. And when I was growing up professionally, there weren't too many role models.
Right.
There weren't too many people that I could look on to and, be able to say that, yes, you can have kids, because most of the women I knew that had very successful careers maybe had to sacrifice and not have kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a successful career, and I teach. I get to do lots of fun things, serve on boards and do lots of things, and that wouldn't be possible if I didn't have, the support system in place. And my husband's been a rock through everything. I mean,
Yeah.
he's amazing. And so, I literally get to do what I want. I just tell him I'm doing this, and he's like, "Can you ever say no?" And I'm like, "No."
No, but it's true. As women, we always put everything on hold for ourselves. And many times on the show, we talk to so many of our guests who are women. And, there are, like, some of my friends too, they have put their career on hold because they always saying, I'm going to wait until my kids finish college, or they leave, finish high school. And it makes me wonder why. Why can't you do both? I know it can be stressful, of course, because there's home and everything else, right? But then you never know what life brings to you, right? So I think you should just grab it if you can, and the opportunity comes, you should, because especially nowadays over here, there are ways. There are always.
There are.
Right?
And, you said the word, opportunity comes. A lot of people are not looking for those opportunities or don't recognize them when they come, and you have to be able to take a risk, and you have to be able to have confidence in yourself that no matter what, you will make it work. There are going to be lots of people that are naysayers that are going to tell you it's not going to work, you're making a mistake. I've had mentors, well-meaning mentors, tell me don't do something because they thought it was going to hurt my career. But I had the gut feeling and I wanted to do it because I knew it was important. So for instance, so I worked really, really hard. I make it to CEO of Select Specialty. I'm 35 years old. Everything that I wanted is coming true. And then 3 months after I take on the role, I find out I'm pregnant with my first child. And, I was obviously thrilled, but at the same time, the first thinking feeling was, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Right. Because it was my very first CEO role. The hospital was, needed a lot of work. I had to rebuild my leadership team. It was a very tough market, for long-term acute care hospitals. And it was really, really challenging. But, it was like, okay, I got to make this work. I'm going to make it work. But I did. So after I had my son, I did kind of plow through the first 6 months, went back to work. But then I realized that, even though I had a great nanny at home, I realized that I was missing out so much because I was gone for 12 hours every day. Right. When I was at work, I was thinking about home. When I was at home, I was thinking about work. And I just realized that I had to, let something go. And obviously it couldn't be my child. And so, I was like, okay, as horrible as it looks on my resume, I'm going to step down from my first CEO job.
Right.
And I'm going to take a sabbatical. And nobody hears of people taking a sabbatical on the admin side. You hear about it when you're doing a research or thesis or things like that. But I said I'm taking a sabbatical. And, I would joke around because so much of what we do, it was one of the toughest decisions that I made in my life, stepping down from your dream job, right? But knowing that the time that I got to spend with my son, those, first moments, I wasn't going to get it again. I could be a CEO again, but I would not get that time back. Right. And so for me, it was like, you know what? And my husband has always been supportive. Like, it's a great partnership, right? So I just told him, I want to quit my job. And he's like, okay, what do you need from me? And I'm like, just keep yours, And then, of course, then I joined all these mommy groups on Facebook. I'm going to the zoo. I'm going here. Right. I'm going there. And my husband would come back home from work and I would have like this honey-do list for him, right? And he's like, you do realize you're not CEO anymore, right? Because I'm like still in that mode and I'm like, I need to do something because I'm going crazy. I love spending time with my son.
Yes.
But, a couple months into it, I realized that, I was not a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
As much as I loved every moment of it, I needed to do something. And then, in healthcare, you never really have any part-time jobs, like especially on the administrative side, on the leadership side. You can't be part-time executive.
Right.
So, just through networking, I knew about this opportunity, and it was with this executive coaching firm that coached healthcare executives. And they were looking for a career transition specialist. They did mainly career coaching. And so I had no idea what the job was, saw the posting, knew the owner of the company. I called him and I was like, Jim, I need something to do. Even if it's answering the phone and saying, Waiter Holden Associates, how may I help you? I'm willing to do that because I really need to work, you know? And he laughed and, he was like, okay, I'm not going to have you answer the phone, but here's, let's talk about it. So I literally created my own position. He was struggling with business development, needed help. He's like, how about your VP of business development? You manage all of, Houston operations, because we had a huge clientele here in Houston. And the company was based out of Atlanta, and he used to travel twice a month. And he's like, you know what, it would be great if I didn't have to travel anymore and you could take over. So we did like these extensive video interview sessions and recordings and things like that. And so I did that for him. And so that ended up being my next gig for the next 4 or 5 years.
I got to interrupt you now. Sure. I have to go on a short break. But when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. This is Chai Time on 99.5 FM.
You're listening to the Chai Time Show on 99.5 FM.
I lost my train of thought. Welcome back to Chai Time on 99.5 FM. So I'm in conversation with Mitali, and she's been sharing her story, her journey with us. So let's just continue. And of course, I want to get down to these points that you shared with me, and I'd love to share it with our listeners as well. So, Mitali, before we went on break, we were talking about
So I was mentioning how I kind of created an opportunity for myself so that I could spend time home with my son, and that position or that opportunity actually ended up being the next 4 years of my life. And I got to work from home, make my own, schedule, spend time with my son, and then, have my daughter shortly after that. So it was an ideal, even though I meant it to be a sabbatical in my career, it ended up being kind of another phase in my career. I got to do career coaching and executive coaching with healthcare leaders. Never had thought, that would be something that I'd end up doing. I also had an opportunity of joining Texas Women's University as adjunct faculty. So I teach graduate healthcare administration students there. So that also kind of happened at that same time. So, you mentioned about opportunities and, just for me, I think it's important to always keep your eyes open and have a really strong network of, have a good professional network so that you can recognize opportunities, or even, sometimes you create opportunities for yourself, and at other times they will find you. You just have to have confidence in yourself to be able to say, yes, I haven't done this before, but I think I can do it. I have transferable skills and I can do it.
Having that kind of confidence is really hard.
Well, nobody's born with it. Nobody's born with it. I can tell you, as a kid growing up, I was definitely not who I am today. Being assertive and being confident. Like I was always an extrovert, as I mentioned to you, but never really the person who was constantly, volunteering for things. I would get volunteered for things, and that kind of built, I guess, my confidence when, people see it in you. So I think other people saw it in me more than I saw it in myself. And it's kind of a process of evolution where you, keep working on things and make sure you become the subject matter expert, so that builds your confidence. And then surrounding yourself with people that you can constantly learn from, people that challenge you constantly in growing, both professionally as well as personally, and that just helps you.
And I think a majority of us like to be in our own bubble and feel safe, and we don't have to. And as women, as mothers, especially with younger kids, it's always like, no, I'll just be with my child, or I'll be with other mothers, so we have something common to talk about. And that's that is good. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but then I guess in order to expand your horizons, we really need to, like you said, think outside the box, go out and be out there, talk to people, network, and things like that. And it's not only I don't think it has to be work related, even for yourself per se, right? Like
Absolutely.
it's always good for yourself.
Yeah.
You grow as a person.
Yeah.
You get more knowledgeable about things. And, besides talking about just family, you're talking about the world. And there's so much going on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, and it's absolutely right, because we tend to have so much of mom guilt, right? Because
We
you're thinking,
do.
especially as working mothers, you feel like I spend so much time away from my kids at work that I shouldn't go to this networking event, or I shouldn't have a girls' night out. But, what I've realized, especially now with COVID and, all of the challenges, ups and downs that everyone's facing, it's not just women. I think, men also
Yes.
need to do that. The self-care, being able to, continue to spend time with friends or spend time with people, go and professionally network.
Right.
Gets more complicated now because of COVID, but then most professional organizations, like I serve on the board for ACHE, which is the American College of Healthcare Executives, and we've done so many different networking events via Zoom and made it fun. We've done tequila tasting and wine tasting and bourbon tasting, and a lot of our educational events and networking, we've used Zoom and breakout sessions and things like that. So there's technology that you can use. But I did want to go over some of the lessons that I had, so one of the things that obviously has been important is don't let anyone else tell you what you can or cannot do. There's lots of times people are going to tell you can do something, but if you feel that, your heart's set in it, it's a goal that you have, then just go for it. And like I said, don't have a plan B, because then,
Guilty.
you're going to think about the plan B, when you don't have a plan B, failure is not an option, right? Because that's all you have, and you've got to make it work. It's probably contrary to a lot of people that say you got to prepare for, other things, but literally, I feel like so many times in my life, I didn't have any other option but that one option. And that's what drove me to make it happen. Lots of times there were circumstances that I couldn't control. And that's where I feel, that a strong faith in, there's, whether it's God or whether it's, whatever, I have that strong spiritual, I'm not religious, but I'm strongly spiritual. And that keeps me going, is that when you put your best in it, it'll happen.
Yeah.
The other thing is not to be afraid to take risks. Every time I took risks, I was able to really propel my career ahead. So it's true. The bigger the risk, I took a sabbatical from a CEO job, worked in executive coaching for 4 years, and then when I was ready to get back into the healthcare operations, I got the opportunity of being a CEO and opening an inpatient rehab hospital, and you probably have seen it. It's Sugarland Rehab Hospital right behind Costco off of University. I actually had the opportunity of opening that hospital. So, it was, again, serendipity, lots of networking, and ended up meeting one of the investors that was opening up the facility, one of the physician investors, and one thing led to another. I was actually trying to help her with placing one of my clients for that CEO role, and she's like, "What are your plans?" And I was like, I wasn't really thinking about this. And they're like, "Well, your kids are old enough, and you can come back." And I'm like, "Sure." And next day, I know I have an offer to open up a hospital. And I was like, I would be foolish not to take that up. I mean, it was a great experience, great learning experience to be able to do that. And then, I would say, we talked about confidence. I feel like it's your attitude. It's all in your attitude. Having that positive attitude, being assertive, being able to believe in yourself, and, that really drives your altitude, how far you go. So I always love to say attitude and not aptitude drives your altitude. You could be, the most brilliant person, but if you don't have that right attitude, if you don't have the drive, if you don't have the motivation, you're not going to go far. And then, find passion in what you do, and you'll never have to work a day in your life. And, I truly, truly enjoy, I love healthcare. I love teaching. I love, growing, developing people. Most people stay away from chaos. I'm a fixer. I love chaos. You put me in a chaotic situation, I'll make sense of it.
You love challenges.
I love challenges.
Bring it on.
It's the adrenaline, right? And then find and be your authentic self. And, sometimes it's a little cliched, when people say be authentic. And like today I'm trying to be authentic and, sharing things that I may not have shared publicly before. It is nerve-wracking, but then at the same time, that truly helps to be the best version of you.
Yes.
A lot of times we spend so much time trying to be somebody else,
Yes.
or our parents tell us, you need to be more like this person or that person or what have you. But, you're never going to be the best version of somebody else but yourself.
Yeah,
so
true.
being authentic, very, very important. The other thing is relationships. They're really your biggest investment. Now, coming from, kind of the Indian culture background, we are a very social, group. So relationships, we do believe strongly in relationships. Right. But one thing I know that I struggled with growing up in India and coming here is to learn how to sell myself, because we're not used to talking about ourselves. We're always raised, our parents raise us with just work hard, and listen and things will happen. Well, no, you have to not just work hard, but be able to talk about what you did and be able to sell yourself. And I think, it's a fine line between humility and arrogance and, finding that right balance of being assertive where you can actually sell yourself, toot your own horn without seeming to be arrogant. Right. It's okay to be able to talk about your accomplishments. It's okay to be proud about what you've accomplished and share that with people. And I know that a lot of times people struggle with that. And I've struggled myself.
Yeah, me too. I have. Yeah, when I went for my first networking event, I was so shy and I was so just a listener and I was just smiling and people were talking about themselves and I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's great. And, it's just like, wow, how do these women do it? How do these people do it, right? Mm-hmm. But then slowly, as I kept going on to other events and all, my self-confidence started building and, talking about my work or my business and all that, I realized that then you have that connection. Mm-hmm. You get, you develop that relation with the other person as well. Mm-hmm. So that made me really listen, but as well as at the same time have a balance of talking as well. So that is so important. I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times you think about, relationships, you don't want to sound off as what am I trying to get out of the person? So always start off the relationship with a positive balance, right? When you meet someone, try and think of how can I be of value to this person? What can I do or share with this person? So even before you get out there to ask someone to help you be the first one, because that also helps in creating that balance. So, as a student, again, as a grad student, just like you said, every time I would go to a networking event and go walk up to an executive, a healthcare executive, my knees would be all wobbly and I'll be like, why would this person even want to talk to me? They're so busy talking to other senior executives. Why would they take the time to talk to me? But I always had to be, creative about what can I do or say to help them. So, maybe they're working on a particular project and they need an extra set of hands and you start volunteering with them and you say, I'm a student, I'm looking for experience. How can I help you with this particular project? Or maybe you connect with two different executives and they have something in common and you make that introduction, right? And then what happens is once their relationship develops, guess what? They remember you because you were the one who made that introduction. Right. And, so those are like easy wins, easy brownie points that you think, or you're reading an article and you remember that person talked about a particular thing. You just send them an email so that you stay on their radar, So even as an early careerist, there are things that you can do so you can continue to build that network and those relationships, because it's very easy to go and meet someone the first time, but keeping up that relationship and having that continuity to make it develop into something is challenging, because what do you keep chatting with the CEO of, MD Anderson or Houston Methodist? You have to find things to kind of keep that going. And how can you serve on different committees or get involved with nonprofit organizations and serve on boards so that you have the ability to network with more people while bringing value to them. It's not just about what can I get out of you or what's in it for me. You have to go in with the mentality of how can I bring value to this other individual.
Right.
And then it comes back to you, like karma. I strongly believe in karma. I just feel like, the more good you do, the more it comes back to you.
Absolutely.
And, if you go in with a mindset of how can I help somebody else, people are going to find ways of helping you. And, obviously I've had lots of great individuals in my career, personally and professionally, that have, been there for me through my challenges. And I'm always driven to try and help others, because, it's kind of a two-way street.
Yeah. And it's nice to see that by helping others, you see their success.
Yeah.
You're happy, it's that proud moment for you as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And then we talk about think outside the box. So obviously, don't limit yourself to things,
right.
Be able to think creatively. Twice in my life, I've created positions for myself. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to, my mentors, that pretty much have created jobs for themselves. And so, don't just go by been there, done that, and that's what I'm going to do, and kind of box yourself. Be open to thinking outside the box and being creative. And that's how you differentiate yourself. I mean, it's a very, very competitive environment.
It is, yeah.
And to be able to differentiate yourself, you can't just be like everybody else.
Right.
And then, one thing that's really, really important, especially for people starting off early on in their careers, is don't get hung up on titles or salary. Like, it's always a competition. You go to school and then you're landing your first gig or your first job and you're comparing, and we do it throughout our careers. We don't just do it early on. We're constantly comparing to what everybody else is doing, and that's why I say define your own success. It's not about titles. It's not about the money. It'll all come. I'm not saying you don't have bills to pay. Of course, money is important. Yeah. But then when you get hung up on the wrong things, then, you don't necessarily find what you're really, truly good at and be able to be that best version of you, because you're constantly comparing yourself to somebody else or trying to do something that somebody thinks is the best option for you and not necessarily what's best for you. So that'll be important is, don't get hung up on that. And not every career is like a ladder. Right? So when you look at my resume or you look at my journey, there have been times where it looks like I've taken a step back or it looks like I've taken a lateral. Right. But eventually I always end up a couple of steps ahead, and so especially now in this day and age when you have so many opportunities of working remotely and things like that, thinking about your career as a lattice and not a ladder is very, very important. So it may be, your career may look like this, or your career may look like this for a while and then takes off. Different people's careers look differently. So don't always look at it as a ladder and say my next move always has to bring me, to the next level. Are you growing professionally in terms of your skills? Are you learning something new? When I went from the CEO to consultant role, I had to take a pay cut. Like I was making 1/3 of what I was making, but I didn't care because, it gave me the flexibility in my life to be able to spend time with my kids, be home, make my own schedule. And, I was okay financially. I didn't need, that. I could do the pay cut. Now, some people, you may have, financial responsibilities, but just don't define yourself by, the title or how much you make. Really, truly look at what value you're able to bring and how you're able to grow in that role. Yeah. So those are kind of, I think, I know I want to keep an eye on the time.
No, we are good. Don't worry.
And then I think one thing I do want to mention is, never stop learning. Obviously manage your toolkit. keep looking at what skills you have, what are your strengths. Almost do a SWOT analysis for yourself, right? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities that are out there for you? What are the threats that could hold you back? And what can you do to kind of strengthen yourself in terms of, getting a different education or keeping up with your certifications or serving on nonprofit organizations or doing different things so that you're constantly developing new skills.
Yeah.
And you're able to kind of grow and move in that direction so that you're constantly assessing what's in my toolkit, what's missing, what can I sharpen, constantly learning something new every day. It keeps you fresh and it keeps you kind of continue to be the subject matter expert that people look onto you for.
Yeah.
And last but not least, want to talk about your personal brand. So I love this quote from Jeff Bezos that says, "Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room." And, I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm very, passionate about is you've got to be able to build a brand because, we think about a brand in terms of, products or services, but that personal brand is so important because it's who people think you are, what you're capable of, right? And literally, when you leave the room, what are people saying about you? Is, Mitali's going to get things done. She's a go-getter. She's a, problem fixer. She thrives in challenges or whatever it is, whatever that reputation is. If you're recommending somebody for an opportunity, people should be able to know that your word is good and strong, right? And so it takes a long time to build that reputation. And it's very, very important because it literally is just like you're trying to build a brand for any other product or service. Right. So, the people that the relationships that you build, your knowledge, your toolkit, what's in it, how how people perceive you, how you come across to people, all of that is a part of your brand. So, being successful, whether it's professionally or personally, keep an eye on your brand. Yeah. And especially now in the age of social media, it is even more important to see what's out there, who's tagging you on what and what's out there, because we all know, whether it's recruiters or anybody else, everyone's checking out your, social media image. You could say or do something which you don't even realize 20 years later can be very, very damaging for you. And so, it's not just about your social brand, your social media brand, but also who you are as a person and what your reputation is. Mm-hmm. Do you stand for, what are the values that you go by so that people know that this is a person that, these are their values and this is what they go by. And that's, I think, at the end of the day, that's what really sets you apart from other people is that personal brand that you worked really, really hard on building and creating and kind of maintaining.
Yeah. I mean, patience is key too. Many times we lose that. We want to be up there, fast.
I want it now.
Fast and furious.
Yes. Instant gratification.
Exactly. It's, I guess, that is how we are as human beings. Mm-hmm. And especially, I know I always say women because sometimes, I come across so many women. There are women that I admire so much that, even though they are retired and they have really been successful in life, they're retired now, but they're still involved in the community. Mm-hmm. They are still part of nonprofits. They still do so much. And that drive, that glow, that, it's just different gratification for them. And that really, I admire those women because they're not like, okay, I'm retired. I've done my, whatever. I've done everything I've done before and I've achieved all my goals and I'm just going to relax. No, but they're such go-getters. And now they're making that difference in the community itself. Mm-hmm. So I just love that. And there are some women who are just, we can't do it at all. I don't want to. I'm not ready. And then I think to myself, why? Just come on, let's go. And sometimes that's frustrations. They're like, how do we push you? And that's why I thought when I got a chance to talk to you and you shared your story with me, I'm like, you're the right person to come on air and talk to. talk to everyone, to our audience today. And it's been so wonderful to listen to you and sharing your advice, sharing your story with us. And I'm sure our listeners have really enjoyed this segment. It's just been wonderful. Is there anything else you would like to, share with everyone before we end?
I should have thought about this. You should have told me that I had
I
to
put you
have
on
like
It's
the
live.
30-second. Well, I mean, no, I think we've pretty much covered everything. It's I do want to say, always have that sense of community and look out for each other.
Yes.
And, I may come off sounding as a feminist, but I think I'm okay with you talking about women a lot. I think as women, we don't do enough to lift each other.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, but we tend to, whether it's mother-in-laws or sister-in-laws or friends or what have you,
yes.
It tends to be more of a competition than a collaboration. And I feel even professionally, a lot of times, we don't have enough women mentoring other women, just because they're not that they don't want to do it. They just either second guess themselves or feel like
fear.
they have to balance, home life and don't have the time. So I would just say, be willing to kind of support each other.
Yes.
And, again, whether it's men, women, what have you, but the willingness to help and support one another and be able to kind of, especially now, there's lots of mental health challenges, lots
Absolutely.
of financial and lots of other issues that people are going through dealing with a pandemic, and it's been hard for everyone.
Yes.
So just being able to help everyone out and support each other.
Thank you, Mitali, for coming here this morning in this rain. I truly appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chai Time listeners, for joining us this morning. You'll all stay safe again and stay indoors if you all can. We shall see you next week, same time. Bye-bye. This is Chai Time on 99.5 FM.